Father Pat again, here for the second fantastic Fridays with Father Pat. And what a gift. What a gift. We had hundreds of responses last week and hopefully it'll be even more this week. Looking for and finding God's love no matter what in my life. I'm legally blind. Been so for over 60 years, 1953, whatever that figures out to when I went blind from meningitis. And everything in my life was you can't do this, you can't do this. No, can't. Even when I tried to get work with the handicapped, because I was challenged by the Library of Congress Division for the Blind and the Handicapped, they told me they wanted me in the work. Just hundreds of letters back saying, oh yeah, we have beautiful programs, but this is why you couldn't do it, because you're blind. And it just kept emphasizing that you can't. And finally, God rest him, Robert S. Bray. He was the head of the Talking Books program for the Library of Congress at the time. He's died since then, but he put forth his feelers, whatever, and I was hired by the New York Public Library to work at their library for the blind and the handicapped, but specifically to find the handicapped throughout the New York City metropolitan area and help them find the city's services for them. I was just so excited. I moved to New York. Everybody, including my family, said, no, you don't want to go to the big bad city. But I did anyway, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Charlotte Harrison, who was my boss, I'll never forget the day I arrived at the library, she pointed to the front door and said, you know why you were hired? The sooner you get out of here and the more you stay out of here, the better you're going to be doing your job. That was quite a carte blanche. I made 4 phone calls and never had to make another one, because those 4 phone calls bought more job, more speaking engagements, and I was on the road full time. It took me all over the city, speaking at branch libraries, at hospitals, at nursing homes, wherever, reminding the handicapped that we all have gifts. In 1975, I'm jumping ahead a few years, Bishop Daniel Patrick Riley of the Diocese of Norwich, Connecticut, heard about this blind brother who was roaming around the world, and he called up and offered me a job I couldn't refuse. He wanted me to come to his diocese, the Diocese of Norwich, Connecticut, and found a ministry for the handicapped. I moved there in December of '75 and founded what came to be known as the Office of Ministry of the Handicapped. It was supposed to be Office of Ministries for the Handicapped, but it didn't take me long. I changed that. I said, no, we're going to focus on our ministry, what we can do for the world with our disabilities, what we can do. One of the first ventures we had brings you to today's story, a true story. I had our first retreat for the handicapped. We gathered together, I don't remember, 2 or 3 dozen disabled adults, and I put together the retreat format, but I wanted each of the handicapped to participate in giving the talks. And I'll never forget that Friday morning. It just happened to be Good Friday, like today is. And I gave Mary Ellen, her task was to share what it meant to her that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, would become a human like her, one just like her, and share with the group what it meant to her to have a Savior who would become just like her. Well, that was fine to say. I'll never forget when she wheeled up in front of the whole group in her wheelchair. She was cerebral palsy and in a wheelchair, and she wheeled up in front of us all, rolled up her notes and put them in her chair next to her, and started to speak from her heart. A few months ago, she said, when Brother Pat asked me to give this talk, I was excited. I thought of how neat it must be that the Son of God became one just like us. How neat it must have been for the disciples and the people to follow him, to walk with him, talk with him, laugh with him, cry with him, share their stories with him. It was just so neat. And I was putting some notes down on my paper for this talk when all of a sudden it hit me. Oh, sure, he became the Son of Man. A nice, able-bodied Son of Man he became. And her voice was filled with anger. He didn't live in a wheelchair like I do. His legs weren't crippled from cerebral palsy. His arms weren't spastic from cerebral palsy like mine. His eyes, she said, they weren't blinded from meningitis like Brother Pat's. I found myself thinking more and more about it and getting angrier and angrier the more I thought about it. Oh, sure, the Son of God became the Son of Man. A nice, able-bodied Son of Man he became. He didn't know what it was like to be handicapped. She said, I found myself getting angrier and angrier the more I thought about it. I finally made up my mind to take up my talk and rip it up and tell Brother Pat he could take his whole retreat and shove it, that I wanted nothing to do with it. And all of a sudden, she said, my eyes fell on the crucifix hanging over the desk. And it didn't take me long before I started to cry. My anger was turned into anguish, sorrow, as I looked at him and saw, no, his legs weren't spastic, crippled from cerebral palsy like mine. His arms weren't spastic and crippled from CP like mine. And no, his eyes weren't blinded from meningitis like Brother Pat's. But his legs were crippled from two rusty nails that held him bound to the wood of that cross. And his arms, they weren't spastic from CP, they were spastic and crippled from two more rusty nails that held them bound to the wood of that cross. And no, his eyes weren't blinded from meningitis like Brother Pat's. They were blinded from the blood, the sweat, the tears pouring into him that he couldn't even wipe away because his hands were nailed to the cross. I came to see, as I sat there, it wasn't Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who didn't know my pain as a handicapped human being. It was me, she said, a very handicapped human being who until now had never known the pain of the Son of God, my Messiah. With her top rolled up, tears streaming down her cheeks and all of our cheeks, she wheeled back to her place. And there was a beautiful, I almost said a dead silence, but it wasn't a dead silence. It was a living silence that filled that retreat room as all of us, for the first time in our lives, saw the handicapped Jesus. In coming to save us, he truly, truly, truly became one of us. That gave a whole new life to our dear ministry. It was a challenge for us to own our disabilities the way he had owned our disabilities. It was a challenge for us to challenge other disabled people to do the same. That's when we changed the name from Office of Ministries for the Handicapped, a nice ministry doing nice things for the handicapped. We changed it to the Office of Ministry of the Handicapped. It was our ministry for the world, teaching the world to live for others.